Hare Krishna, everyone. This is Kalakanta Das, and tonight we have a great interview with His Holiness Krishna Kshetra Swami. Hare Krishna, Krishna Kshetra Swami. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
My pleasure to be with you.
Krishna Kshetra Swami was initiated by Srila Prabhupada, and he actually has traveled extensively. He's initiating guru in ISKCON, and for the last, I'd say 2 years, is that right? You've been acting as a Minister for Cow Protection and Agriculture for Europe?
Already 2 years now, is it?
It's coming to 2 years. Time passes very quickly.
Yeah.
And also, you have written a beautiful book, which at the end we might talk about, which is called Cow Care in Hindu Animal Ethics. And it's a nice book, which we can then talk about a little more. Okay, so today we are talking about, the topic of today is about why cow protection and agriculture are important for Srila Prabhupada. And I might start asking you, you did meet Srila Prabhupada in the early 70s, am I correct?
Yes, I first met Srila Prabhupada in Paris in summer of 1972. I had first met the devotees, or I was staying with the devotees in Germany, and then we all went to Paris to meet Prabhupada there. Excuse me. And yeah, somehow or other, Srila Prabhupada was very kind. He gave me initiation at that time. And the rest is history. I went back to Germany, and for several years, we can say I was based in Germany. Prabhupada gave me that instruction that I should help in Germany, so I did, tried to. And then gradually more and more traveling and so many other things. And somehow I became interested in, I lived for some time at Singachalam Farm in southeastern Germany. And we had cows, maybe 20 cows. At the time we had the most cows. It's a small farm. And of course I was aware that Prabhupada was very much stressing cow protection and agriculture. So it was quite a long time in the back of my mind that, okay, this is somehow important, and how it's important and why it matters and why it's a good thing. These were questions going through my mind over the years. And then in more recent years, opportunity came to look more closely into the whole subject.
When you met Srila Prabhupada, many disciples or people were with him describing their relationship or their impression. What was your first impression when you met him at that time? Do you still remember that?
My first impression was, here he is, my eternal Father.
Wow, that's
he who I've been looking for. I had a sense for a couple of years that I need to find a qualified guru, although the word guru was not known to me at that time, or at least wasn't familiar. But I had already a sense of what such a person should be, how such a person should be. And then when I met Srila Prabhupada, I immediately felt, yes, here he is.
Okay.
Here he is, and here he is, and here I am, ready to take shelter.
That's really good. We think of Prabhupada in many ways, and he was so brave in conquering the world in so many aspects, introducing the cult of bhakti in the times of challenge. And then the question comes, why cow protection, agriculture are important for Srila Prabhupada. We introduced that he was one of the first, I think I heard that from yourself, to introduce cow protection in the West. Is that correct?
Yeah, as far as we know, in any systematic way, in any case, and in an explicit way. So I haven't come across any counter narrative to that.
Okay. So why was it so important for him, in your vision, cow protection and agriculture? Where was that inspiration coming from, and what was his ideas behind it?
I think it's first of all interesting to consider that if we look back to his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and the previous acharyas, and I may be corrected on this, but to my knowledge, they were not speaking on this subject so much. Nor am I aware that, for example, Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur's Gaudiya Mat system around India, maybe some of them had a few cows, just kind of a little goshala for the kitchen, for the temple. Maybe some of them have had, or maybe they have today. But to my knowledge, there's not so much talk about cows. It could be because it was kind of understood, it was assumed. Of course, we protect cows. And it could also be because it was understood that, for the most part, in India, in those days, cows were more or less protected. Although the issue historically becomes more and more intense about cow protection by the 1880s, from the research I did. In any case, it's interesting that Prabhupada makes this really a very significant, we may want to say, plank of his platform. I've pulled up some quotes from him, and one of them I think is relevant here. This is from a letter to Rupanuga Prabhu, written 18th December 1974. Prabhupada wrote, "Our farm projects are an extremely important part of our movement. We must become self-sufficient by growing our own grains and producing our own milk. Then there will be no question of poverty. So develop these farm communities as far as possible." So addressing the question why, we can say that Prabhupada saw it in economic terms, that that communities of devotees should become what he called self-sufficient. And this meant developing such projects where two things would be produced. One is grains and the other is milk, which means there would be cows and there would be bulls or oxen, without which, unless you use tractors, you don't get grains. And in any case, without which you don't get milk. So some idea of self-sufficiency was there. And I believe this had to do, if we again look historically, with how things were going in India after Indian independence from the British. basically the Indian government made an about face from everything that Mahatma Gandhi was striving for in terms of principles of village-based economy. The government turned in the other direction. We will expand. They decided we will expand major industry, and we will do all that we can to catch up with the West in terms of industrial development. Prabhupada saw this was the way the winds were blowing, and I think this is also was an impetus for him even to go to the West. As we know, he made an initial attempt to start his movement in India and in Jhansi. And it didn't work out, so he turned west. And I suspect that in general, of course, he had this understanding, if I can make Westerners, if I can inspire Westerners to take up bhakti, Krishna bhakti, bring them back to India, then the Indians will pay attention. But I think part of the vision that he had, an integral part of his vision, was that we will show how it's possible to have communities which are farm-based, village, etc., essentially following a model which was known in India from ancient times, but which India seemed to be headlong running toward forgetting. And of course, he wanted to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, by the way. And he wanted to show that it is not just a matter of religion in the sense of I believe this and I believe that, but it's a way of life, and it's a viable way of life in economic terms, which is not dependent on the consumer culture that has sort of taken away the entire global economy at present. So he wanted to show not something new, but something in a sense timeless. And so as soon as the first opportunity came in America, when he had been speaking about it would be good to get some land, to get a farm, the first opportunity came. It would eventually be called New Vrindavan in 1968, was it? I think so.
Yes, I think late 1968.
Yeah, then Srila Prabhupada was very enthusiastic that let's do it now. Let's make it happen. Let's realize it.
So from what I hear, you're actually showing, and we can infer that Prabhupada was an admirer of Gandhi in his youth. Actually, he wore those clothes, and he didn't take his diploma as a protest to that system in a way. So do you think he took inspiration from that system of Gandhi? I mean, is that something we could infer as followers of Srila Prabhupada?
Yeah, I think it's not unreasonable to take it that he had, of course, there were things that Prabhupada very strongly rejected about Gandhi, especially his way of interpreting the Bhagavad Gita. But I think that there was quite a bit of Gandhi's approach, especially about these things about economics, village-based economics, based on care for animals, not just cows, but other animals, and so on. And with this, of course, the dietary principle of being vegetarian, all of these were a kind of package which certainly Prabhupada was inspired, at least to some extent, how to measure, but to some extent he must have taken some inspiration for that from Mahatma Gandhi, but of course also from his own family, from his own upbringing. He was learning these principles from his father. And then it was all being confirmed when he met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur. But about cows in particular, being concerned, we have to protect cows. It's a guess. It would take a lot more research to try to dig in to see, any hard evidence of this. But it's a kind of hunch that, to me, that Prabhupada would have taken something of this from Gandhi, because also Gandhi established altogether 4 communities, 2 in South Africa and then 2 in India, that were aspiring to be in some degree self-sufficient. They didn't have so many animals, to my knowledge, and very few cows, but the idea was there, and Gandhi was certainly spending a lot of time on 1 or 2 of his projects, his self-sufficiency projects in Gujarat.
Because when you read the quote from Prabhupada, we immediately are taken to the analogy of the spinning wheel. Gandhi was questioning if that spinning wheel would save the world. I mean, how could that do? And he was saying precisely because it's small and replicable, that it's a powerful tool, that every household doing it could actually put a challenge to the world. Similarly, Prabhupada seemed to be saying to us that if we are able to capture that abundance, really, that the farm life can give, and let's say an intercourse with nature and its biological processes, which are discussed today, we could also get some of that and then have time to pursue our bhakti purposes. Would that be a reasonable parallel to establish?
Yeah, I think so. It's an interesting parallel. And so many times Prabhupada would say that you just have, 1 acre of land, the householder, and he has his cow, and you don't even have to work all year. You work for a few months, and the rest of the time you can sit and chant Hare Krishna.
Correct.
Now, I want to also say, I think we have to also consider, and some may be upset by this comment, but Srila Prabhupada grew up in Calcutta. He did not grow up on a farm. And so what knowledge he has, I mean, we appreciate that he has deep knowledge of everything that he spoke about. And at the same time, we may not have to demand of him that he knew all the ins and outs. In fact, he would say himself, you are intelligent, you figure it out. He would give the principle, and we devotees should figure out how to do it in practice. But the point is, he would say, if we do things right, then we'll have more time for practicing bhakti.
Yeah, that's an incredible point, because one of his major presentations was the world was in a crisis of ecology, mainly because of the way they were using fossil fuels and an artificial lifestyle, which is very much a discussion today on environmental forums. And he seemed to have that vision way back. So to some degree, he seemed to be already anticipating the remedy in the early 60s or late 60s. Was that so?
Seems so, yeah. And he was thinking also how to expand the Krishna consciousness movement in the social dimension. And that's why, of course, we hear from him repeatedly about Varnashrama. And he very much associated the concept of Varna and ashrama with simple living, high thinking, farm residing on and working on farms, connecting with the earth. I would say this is the essential point. Unlike so many more or less so-called spiritual movements, where it's all about having, so to say, the head in the clouds. Srila Prabhupada had his feet. Prabhupada had his head far above the clouds, first of all. And he had his feet on the ground in the sense that he was always thinking very practically. And he was thinking of long-term, the development of the culture of Krishna consciousness, worldwide long-term. What will be the economic base? What will be the source of wealth? And, people forget that the source of wealth is in the soil. It's in the sun and the soil. It's not in the plastic in the supermarket and so on.
That's a great point. And I'd like to just go back a little bit on your point about Varnashram and cow protection, the land and the soil. Sometimes when we discuss Varnashram, it's reduced to agriculture and cow protection. And I think that's a simplistic way of looking at it. There's a way more. Why do you think it gets reduced to that? What is the reason why sometimes it's thought that cow protection agriculture depends on, Varnashram depends on cow protection agriculture? That's the question.
It could be because Prabhupada often spoke of these two things together. Of course, he was not thinking only Vaishyas and therefore farms, but he was thinking of complete communities, Vaishyas, Shudras, Kshatriyas, and Brahmanas, and he would emphasize the necessity. Sometimes, of course, he would say, our mission is to develop Brahminical culture, as he called it.
Right.
This was another way he would speak, that if we can establish Brahminical culture, then everything else will fall into place. The idea being the Brahmins are the head of the society, and they will illuminate, they will show how everything else can go. And then he took another step in that regard, and this is something not at all yet developed, is the idea of the Varnashram college.
Right.
But yes, he would speak a lot about Varnashram in relation to farms, and therefore cow protection. But there's also the cows and Brahmins connection. That where there is protection of cows, only there can we speak of Brahminical culture, and vice versa. But then where do you have cows? Well, you have them on farms.
Right.
I guess there are other factors as well. The fact that, okay, we started farms. We have had some efforts to make farm communities, but there's a sense in which those who engage in the more so-called Brahminical activity of missionizing, of going out and preaching and so on. They are not on the farms. They are not doing the farming. And so you kind of, you start to be habituated to think of associating, okay, Varnash, there's preaching, there's Bhagavata Dharma, and that's maybe what the Brahmins do. And then there's Varnashrama, and who's doing that? Well, it's mainly the Vaishyas on the farms.
Yeah, and
There's there's a book which is going to be coming out soon on Varna Dharma. That's been completed. Basically, it's completed now. I just spoke with her yesterday by Shrimati Urmila Devi and Shrimati Rukmini Devi, not Urmila, my god sister, and Rukmini, not my god sister, another. So they've combined, they've written a book, 400 and something pages, called Career Dharma. And she showed me the table of contents. It's really very interesting, and I think it's going to be very helpful for our society to get a clearer understanding of what it's all about, especially Varna Dharma.
That's great to hear. Great to hear so many writings are coming up. You mentioned previously to our little discussion on Varnashram on the reformatting the wealth concept. Could it be that, do you think Prabhupada, was he trying to show a different format for wealth? And if so, what was that format?
Well, the basis of wealth, the ultimate source of wealth is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Bhagavan, the possessor of all wealth, and he provides wealth. He provides well-being for all living beings. Nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo viradati kaman. That's the basic principle. More especially, the Lord provides for his devotees. Ananyas chintayanto mam yejana paryupasate tesham nityabhyuktanam yogakshema vaham yaham. And then, how does the Lord provide? What are the means by which he does this? And here the question comes, I think, in relation to the principle of work. What is actual work? And that we understand is, it helps to understand practices of work, first of all, by understanding that we cannot not work for even a moment. Nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtatya karmakrit. There's no such thing as not working or acting. And then how to act, the question comes, that depends on our guna and karma, our qualities in nature. How do we determine that? That's a process by which we recognize that we have some qualities which are not like those of others. And if we can work based on those, we can be happy. And aside from that, how wealth is generated is through goods and services. It's not by artificial means of, cryptocurrency and so on, which is generating sort of so-called value out of nothing, using a lot of electricity in the process. But it's and as the saying goes, you cannot eat nuts and bolts, you cannot eat money. So essential value in economic terms comes from the earth, and it comes from, we are essentially still a farming culture. We're not a hunter-gatherer culture. And so in a farming economy, there's need for stability, and that stability is established through a social structure which includes kshatriyas, who are protecting, making it possible to peacefully farm. And it's made possible with animals, especially ruminants, and especially cows, since cows produce, they produce a special kind of wealth in the form of milk, which can be used in so many different ways, including preparing ghee, which then can be offered in sacrifice, which is sort of the cosmic system for cosmic maintenance that Krishna speaks about in the Gita. Everyone becomes satisfied, all these celestial beings, and of course the Lord himself is satisfied by offerings made in sacrifice. The essential ingredient of which, the physical ingredient, traditionally is clarified butter or ghee. So that's all together makes a kind of system. Evam pravartitam chakram. Chakra is a circle, and Krishna describes this circle or cycle. Nanuvartayati haya agayur indriya ramo mogam partha sajivati. If one is not following this system, Krishna says mogam, a person or a group not following it are moga, they are failures, basically.
And that's interesting because in our thought process, we see Prabhupada talking to us about artificial living and man being or feeling separated from nature, as if man can industrialize life, can create life from laboratories, can create productions from industrial farming. And it seems to us from the perspective of agriculture that the wealth is also connected to a living soil. And then from that living soil, abundance would come and all of the things which we will be looking for. So how would you say that we as a movement could take advantage of this inspiration Prabhupada gave to now understand better that where does abundance come from in terms of a living soil, in terms of a system, a planetary system?
Specifically, how as a movement can we realize this?
Can we realize that, and can we take advantage of that?
First principle is enthusiasm, utsahan, nischayat, having conviction, and dhairyat, having patience. Now, some of us may feel that, well, we've had enough patience. We've been, sort of patiently waiting for things to happen over the last 5 decades, and not a whole lot is happening. And to this, I have a quote from Prabhupada here. He says, in 1976, he wrote to Krishna Maheshwari, he said, "We have got more than 100 temples all over the world, and attached to every temple we are opening farms. It's interesting that he wrote this as what nowadays you would call an affirmation, where you take something that's not a reality, but you would like it to be a reality. And so you speak about it as if it is a reality in the present tense. We have got, of course, by that time there were 100 temples, probably, if not more. And attached to every temple, we are opening farms. How many farms were we actually opening in 1976? I don't know.
14. He makes in another letter a presentation that we have 14 farms and they're doing very well. He actually says that.
Okay. So that's also speaking positively and showing his patience that, okay, we're working toward it. But here we are, some decades later, and we may wonder, okay, where are we in this? What's our trajectory? And so I think it's nice to go back to Srila Rupa Goswami, who says, Utsaha nischayat daryat tat karma pravartanat. That first thing is enthusiasm. And enthusiasm comes when there's a sense of, I would say, real possibility. Here's something that can really happen, where we really will be able to point to it and say, here it is. We can show people, and it will be a reality. And then nischaya goes closely together with that, the basis of conviction that it's possible. Just considering how were people living, it's not something new that we're trying to do. People's, we really wonder, how is it possible? Because we've become so entrenched in our modern economic systems that it really does become difficult to imagine. But we forget thereby that how many centuries, how many millennia perhaps were people living. And someone may say, well, they were living, yes, but they were basically living hand to mouth. They were really just barely getting by. And so many disadvantages were also there, which we don't have to suffer today. Yes, that's true. But looking now from where we are, with whatever advantages we may have that are of value, we can apply those, and we can not try to realize a utopia, because utopia means a place which doesn't exist and never will. But we can establish, we can work in the direction toward, in a determined way, toward a more direct dependence on the land, as you said, on living soil. And how are we getting living soil? It's important that we have ruminants, especially cows, who are enriching the soil with the cow dung, and by proper grazing methods.
Right. You have before spoken about connecting ecological dots, and it was cows, dharma, and sankirtan. Is that a direction to think?
Yes, and it may be good to think of this as, I like to sometimes make little mental diagrams to think of this as a circle instead of a line. So we would have, within this circle, we would have Dharma, and we would have Sankirtan, and we would have cows, where each is complementing the other, each is facilitating the other. So Dharma, we understand, is it's the set of principles of maintaining, of sustaining. It comes from the verbal root dri, which means to sustain. And it is all the practices and also rules, regulations, which help us to sustain ourselves individually, collectively, and cosmically, the whole planet. And I think what we want to show when we speak about Sankirtan, and we often use the word outreach, is that we have something to offer this world where everyone's getting worried now, more and more, about what are we doing with our planet. And how many more generations are going to be able to live on this planet, and so on. It's so mainstream now, this concern. We have something to offer, but what we have to offer, essentially, of course, is to worship Lord Sri Krishna, who is Gopal, who is Govinda, and who himself has a day job, which is herding cows, which he does in a very wonderful way by playing on his flute. We want to contribute some good for the world. We want to say, look, how about living like this?
Right.
But we can only do that if we're actually living like that. To just talk about it is very well-meaning, but not very effective.
Right. So when you speak about Sankirtan, there's an idea of together, but there's another meaning of Sankirtan which you bring out.
Well, Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur says that the prefix sam means together, and it also means complete. It is complete glorification of the Lord. It is comprehensive glorification of the Lord. And we may want to say, to connect these dots, that comprehensive glorification of the Lord is to serve him, including Go Seva, as it's popularly referred to in many circles in India today of people enthusiastic for cow protection. Go Seva, service to cows, seeing these cows as Krishna's cows. Then it becomes another way of making the glorification complete.
Okay, that's beautiful. Because then now we've discussed about the living soil and the participation of the cows in the complete glorification of Krishna and living the lifestyle. And you have written a book, I think 2 years ago, which we have covered, which is called Kshetra in Hindu Animal Ethics. Here's one of the copies we ordered together. It's here. And would you like to say something about this initiative that you did?
Okay. Yes, I was invited to write a book on the subject of Hinduism and animal ethics. So this idea of animal ethics may be a bit strange, but it's a term which has become more in use among some scholars, especially to cover the whole issue, the question of how should human beings relate with animals. And we have in Oxford one small institute called the Oxford Center for Animal Ethics, where these subjects are discussed, conferences are held, and books are published. So the director of that center invited me to write such a book. And as I thought about it, it seemed that a very particular concern would be on the subject of cows. If it is to be focused on so-called Hinduism, then certainly a very central concern is cows. And this idea was approved, and I went ahead with the work. It's an academic book, technically speaking. It's published by an academic publisher, which means it undergoes a peer review. That is actually 2 peer reviews. And so it has to meet certain standards. And it's aiming to address, I would call it an educated audience, and my purpose is twofold. One is for our internal society within the broader society of Vaishnavas, including ISKCON, but not exclusively ISKCON. And it's addressing also a wider landscape, we may say, of people who identify themselves as Hindu more generally. And a third audience is the sort of intellectual community who are considering seriously the whole ethical issue of relating with animals and seriously questioning our general practices around the world of, animal slaughter, wholesale animal slaughter rather than animal protection. So in that context, or these 3 contexts, I've written this book. And I also was able, with help from many very generous people, Vaishnavas, I was able to do a fundraising project that enabled this book to be published, what's called open access.
Right, here's the link. We have the link here. If somebody wants, they have the link where to download the book from. And how many downloads have you had so far on this book?
The last I looked a few days ago, the metrics was at 45,000 copies. So we don't know who those people are. Unfortunately, we don't get any further information. We just get the numbers. But somebody, and I guess over time more will read. And my idea is also that this book can prompt others to do more careful, more thorough research. My contract from the publisher to write the book said I asked for 3 years. I wanted 3 years to do the research and the writing, and they said, well, actually, we only give 2-year contracts. Okay, 2 years then. So it was truth be told, a bit of a rush, and so many things that I was looking into. I thought, oh, there's a lot more to be understood about this particular aspect. So my hope is that others will do that work, because something that's really important, I did not in my book go into the economics of cow care and cow protection. I talk about it, but only in very minimal ways, and I don't get into numbers. And that's something that someone will have to do, because if this is going to be taken more seriously, and people are going to say, oh, this makes sense, let's do this, let's get some cows, let's start such a project, they're going to first need more precise information about how it can work, especially in economic terms.
But for an academic book, 45,000 downloads is pretty massive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite good. Yeah.
You do speak about many points which I think offer a baseline for us to start the work. The relationship between Dharma, as we explored here, and also from Dharma to yoga to bhakti, and the origins of cow protection in India and in the West with Srila Prabhupada. Is there any specific points which you think are relevant for initial listener to know about?
Mm-hmm. Well, some listeners might say, well, that's all very well, but, I don't have the time to go through such a book. Then what I would suggest is go ahead and jump to chapter 6. There are 7 chapters altogether. The 7th is just sort of a wrap up and reflection, but the 6th chapter is specifically focusing on what might be involved in developing a future for cow protection. And specifically toward the end of that chapter, I have what I call 6 affirmations. I mentioned before affirmations. So these are sort of imagining what could be done, what could be possible for a bright future for cow protection and cow care. So one could go ahead and sort of jump into that.
Krishna Kshetra Swami, you are an advisor board member of the Ministry of Cow Protection and Agriculture, and also a minister for Europe. So from those positions, what roles could the ministry play in assisting our communities to expand cow protection and agriculture?
I see it as mainly educational and facilitating with resources, with knowledge. If we could be a resource hub for all kinds of people to take up what we are about, what we want to see expanded, I think it would be very good. And what I mean by that is a kind of a sure way to fail is to think that the institution called ISKCON has to do all of the farming and all of the cow protection. If we do like that, it's going to be top down, and it's not going to work. And I think we've seen that already with some projects. It has to come more from, dare I say, grassroots, roots of grass in healthy soil. In other words, from people, from all kinds of people, to say, yeah, I like this. The Hare Krishnas, they have some good ideas. And some of them may say, well, I'm not, I don't know about all these things that they go for, like Lord Vishnu breathing out and creating the universe. I don't know if I can. I mean, it's cool, but I don't know. But anyway, aside from that, they do have some really good points, some good ideas about how to live a good life and develop in a purposeful way my spiritual side. So I want to go with this, but how to do it? Okay, here's some resources. Here's some
Let's
courses. Here's some research. Here's an advisor. Here's a coach that can help me out.
That's wonderful. And that's the purpose of these interviews. I mean, the first interviewees are the board members themselves. And then we're going to expand to a whole range of leaders and managers in farms and who have a lot to say. And to this note, we have already started our directory to know which farms do we have. And from the 14 we mentioned in 76, we have now 108 around 109 maybe. We are finalizing projects, which
Good.
of which I'd say something like 60 to 70 are actual farms. So from 14 to 70 we already have some measurement. So this app is basically ready. So that's
Oh, very
something
good.
to inform you as a board member that
Yes, it's
anybody will
good
be
to
able to
know.
access. And the second feature of this app is that there'll be resources there. It's exactly what you mentioned, resource hub. We're trying to do that. And the first initiative is, of course, the Goshala Managers course, which is being launched very soon. And it's the content is ready, and we're getting some more interviews. So it seems that
Yeah.
from the advisory board to the ministry working on the ground people, it seems to have some alignment in that notion. And that's good to hear.
Well,
Um,
and I'm so happy that you're doing all that you're doing, Kalakanta, in this regard. You're having a good vision of getting the groundwork and developing everything. So keep it up.
Thank you so much, Kshetra
What is
Swami.
the name of
Actually,
the app that you said is happening?
it's for the moment, it's called Go Manage Cows. And
Uh-huh.
we are just finalizing the content to launch to the wider public, and probably will
Okay.
change the name. For the moment, it's Go Manage Cows, because the
Yeah.
managers could easily access and upload content and materials.
Yeah.
But
Good.
I think very, very recently, very soon, maybe within 3 weeks, we are planning to launch it to the wider
Oh,
public. And
okay.
you can find any project with name, address, contacts right there.
How about just go with cows?
Go with cows. Yes. That would be great. That would be a nice idea. I'll write this suggestion down. Go with cows. Yes. Wonderful. Okay, so any concluding thoughts you'd like to convey to our listeners? We're coming to the end of this beautiful interview with His Holiness Krishna Kshetra Swami.
Well, let me see. Maybe we can just end with another quote from Srila Prabhupada. This is a letter to Uttal, and this is January 1977, so quite late. Getting and managing a farm is a good proposal. I am encouraging farm projects everywhere. That is a very important, solid program. So do this enthusiastically, and Krishna will be pleased.
Well, that's really wonderful to hear. Our founder, Acharya, did have a very important mission for the farms. And I
Mm,
see a lot of success around and that to be one of our series, why farms are successful. And
mm,
we'll be hearing more from that. So for all of you who have listened today our interview, a big thanks. Thank you very much for being with us, staying until the end. And if you we'll keep you posted on the further interviews. Krishna Kshetra Swami, it was a pleasure to have you here with us as usual, and we hope to do more. I think there's such a vast knowledge you could convey. We'll need more interviews to cover those.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Hare Krishna, everyone. See you soon.